Paint roller. A shaver.
You're wrong, it's a dessert topping.
But there's some things that make it all worthwhile and more.
Do you remember the things from Grandma's house? The ones you forgot you grew up with? Those everyday items shaped our childhood visits, from plastic-covered couches to the clatter of Tupperware lids in a warm, humming kitchen. What else have we left behind without even realizing it? Plastic couch covers were the sound of Grandma's living room. That crinkle under your legs on a summer afternoon while you tried not to stick to the seat, that was a rite of passage. These clear vinyl shields were everywhere, preserving floral sofas like they were museum pieces. It did not matter how faded the cushions were underneath. Those covers meant no touch. Guests could sit, but not sink. And as kids, we knew better than to leap onto that couch unless we wanted to be told off for the 5th time that day. It was not just about cleanliness. It was about keeping what you had, making it last. Some covers even had that zipper down the back, making it feel like you were unwrapping a brand new item every time someone took a seat. And yes, in the summer, it felt like you were baking in a vinyl oven. But weirdly enough, that plastic squeak became part of the comfort. Years later, when you sat on a sofa that did not make a sound, something felt missing. It is wild to think that in all the effort to protect those cushions, Grandma was really just protecting the stories that happened on them. The naps, the gossip, the grandkids climbing where they should not. She made sure it would all stick around, just like the covers. The avocado green rotary phone was not just a way to call someone, it was a whole experience. Heavy, loud, and bolted to the kitchen wall like it was guarding state secrets, this phone rang like a fire drill. There was no ignoring it. The sound pierced right through your bowl of cereal or the quiet hum of the afternoon. You had to get up to answer it, stretch the cord as far as it would go, and hope no one tripped on it while you tried to talk in peace. And let us not forget the rotary dial, that slow, clunky spin of each number with the little pause afterward. Call your friend with too many nines in their number, and you were there for a full minute just dialing. It was the kind of phone that made you commit. And color-wise? Avocado green was everywhere back then, in the kitchen, on the fridge, on the stove, and of course, right here on the wall. It was not subtle. It had attitude. This phone saw everything. Family arguments, teenage crushes, hours of gossip, and Grandma yelling, "Who's calling during dinner?" like it was a crime. You could always find it, no matter how dark the kitchen was, because that green just glowed like it was powered by its own special light bulb. It is strange, really, how a piece of plastic and metal could feel like such a warm memory. But it does, and always will. Tupperware burping lids were a real event. You could not just snap the lid on and call it a day. Oh no. You had to press it down, run your hand along the edge, and then give it that proud little push in the center. The burp. That was how you knew it was sealed. It was the sound of leftovers being saved, casseroles being packed, and school lunches being built before sunrise. Every piece came in a color that somehow felt both pastel and neon at the same time, like coral orange or electric mint. Some lids were stretched beyond belief from years of use, and yet they still burped when sealed. Grandma had a whole drawer just for them, and good luck finding the right lid on the first try. But once you did, it was like unlocking a secret level in a video game. These containers were more than just plastic. They were economy, they were planning, they were, "I made extra because I knew you'd stop by." They traveled to potlucks, family reunions, and funerals. They were filled with comfort food, jello, ham salad, or yesterday's dinner nobody wanted, but everyone would eat anyway. And somehow, through it all, that burping sound stuck in your head like a song you never forgot. One sound, one moment, one memory sealed for good. The Butterc tin full of sewing supplies is maybe the most iconic bait and switch of all time. You saw that blue tin on top of the fridge or buried in the cupboard, and your brain immediately screamed, "Cookies!" But no. Open the lid, and you were greeted by spools of thread, a pair of old scissors, a tangled mess of measuring tape, and a tomato-shaped pincushion that looked like it had seen battle. Somehow, this was completely normal. It was not even a letdown after a while. It just was. That tin was Grandma's toolbox, the heartbeat of every mended sock, every re-sewn button, every hem that needed fixing before church. She did not need a fancy sewing kit. She needed that tin. It was dependable, it was sturdy, and most importantly, it was recycled, a word she never used but lived by every day. The outside still said Royal Dansk, with pictures of cookies you had long stopped believing in, but that smell, a mix of metal, dust, and thread, that was the real scent of home economics. No one questioned it. No one threw it out. In fact, half of us probably still have one tucked away somewhere. Not for cookies, of course, for memory, for muscle memory. For a time when you fixed what tore instead of tossing it. All in a blue tin that once lied to you, and still made you smile anyway. Milk glass candy dishes were little sculptures that lived on Grandma's coffee table. They were white, heavy, and always filled with candies you were not sure anyone actually liked. Peppermints that crumbled, butterscotch wrapped in gold plastic, or those strawberry ones that nobody bought. They just existed. You would sneak one when no one was looking, crunch through it like you were chewing on chalk, and still go back for another. The dish itself was the star, though. It had this delicate raised pattern, like lace made from glass, and sat on the table like it owned the room. It looked too fancy to touch, yet there you were, lifting the lid as quietly as possible. You never really asked for candy. You just took it and hoped Grandma would not notice. Spoiler alert, she always noticed. But she never said anything. That candy dish was not just about candy. It was a centerpiece. It was tradition. It was hospitality, even if no one actually liked the sweets inside. You could tell when the house was having company by how full it was. It sat there year after year, barely moving, always glowing in the afternoon light like it belonged in a museum of mid-century manners. And maybe it did. Now, when you see milk glass in a thrift store, you do not think vintage. You think of the candy you did not like and the grandma you loved more than anything. Afghans thrown over the couch were Grandma's version of home decor, and a security blanket rolled into one. You know the ones. Zigzag patterns in every color of the rainbow, or square patches stitched together like a family quilt. They were never folded perfectly, always just a little rumpled like someone had just gotten up from a nap. And they smelled like home. Not the house, home. A mix of laundry soap, warm air, and time. These Afghans were not bought, they were made. Hours spent with a crochet hook and quiet focus, yarn looped and twisted until a whole blanket came to life. You were not allowed to sit on the couch unless you gently moved the Afghan first, or better yet, just wrapped yourself in it and vanished for an hour. They lived through every season, every guest, every grandkid who came to visit. If one ever got torn or snagged, it would get patched up before you even noticed. It was not just a blanket, it was a comfort ritual. It was there during storms, sick days, and sleepovers. You never asked for it. You just knew where it was, and that it would always be there. In a world that moves fast and forgets things too easily, Grandma's Afghan is a soft reminder that care takes time, and that warmth can be woven. Jello molds with suspended fruit were pure domestic drama. It was not enough to make gelatin. Grandma had to trap things inside it like prehistoric fossils. Cherries, grapes, bananas, even shredded carrots or marshmallows if she was feeling wild. It jiggled like it was alive, sparkled under kitchen lights, and somehow always tasted like lime no matter the color. These were not desserts. They were sculptures. And they showed up everywhere. Family holidays, church luncheons, community potlucks. You cut into them carefully, like a surgeon, not knowing if you would get fruit or just a cold, rubbery mystery. And yet, everyone had their favorite kind. Not because they loved the taste, but because it reminded them of who made it. Jello molds were Grandma's way of saying, I made an effort. They took time. They needed special trays, and they came out of the fridge with pride. Even the weird ones. Especially the weird ones. It is easy to laugh at them now, but back then, this was art. This was tradition. This was the bright, wobbly centerpiece of the folding table with the good tablecloth. And no matter what flavor it was, there was always a little bit left in the fridge the next day. A leftover monument to how hard she tried to make things special. And somehow, she did. The TV Guide magazine stack lived right next to the recliner, quietly running the household like a miniature media empire. You did not pick a show back then. The shows were scheduled, and Grandma knew them all. These little booklets were dog-eared, underlined, sometimes missing pages from being read too many times. You flipped through one and felt like you were holding history. Listings for the Lawrence Welk Show, Murder, She Wrote, Bonanza. Shows that wrapped the living room in a gentle hum of static and stories. There was no streaming. You made time. You planned around television like it was a doctor's appointment. These guides made sure you never missed your favorites. And Grandma took it seriously. The guide was never thrown out. Older ones were saved just in case and stacked like little time capsules under the end table or in a basket by the couch. They were filled with movie reviews, TV trivia, crossword puzzles, and the occasional surprise coupon. Holding one now feels like flipping through a diary. Not yours, but the house's. What everyone watched when they sat down together and what mattered at the time. It was more than paper. It was ritual. It was routine. It was how Grandma stayed informed, entertained, and in control, all from her favorite chair. The ceramic light-up Christmas tree was not just a decoration. It was Christmas, condensed into a single glowing object. Every year, she would pull it out of the closet with care, unwrap it from layers of newspaper, and plug it in with the same sense of ceremony people say for lighting real trees. Tiny plastic bulbs were poked into holes all over it. Reds, greens, blues, and yellows. And when that light inside turned on, magic. The whole living room turned soft and quiet. You knew Christmas was really here. Grandma might have had a full-size tree too, but this was the heart of it. It sat on the side table or piano top like a little beacon of holiday calm, and no matter how old it got or how chipped the glaze was, no one would dare replace it. Some bulbs would fall out every year, and you would help her find them, tucking them back into their little sockets like tiny ornaments. It did not smell like pine. It did not drop needles, but it felt like Christmas more than anything else. Years later, you see one in an antique store, and suddenly you are 6 years old again, drinking cocoa you did not even like, watching the tree blink in the dark like it was waiting for Santa. The yellow Pyrex mixing bowls were practically members of the family. Big, round, and cheerful, they sat on the counter waiting to be filled with something good. That buttery yellow was warm, not too loud, not too soft, just right for batter, mashed potatoes, or fruit salad with too many mini marshmallows. Grandma used the same bowl for everything. It was part of a set, but somehow this one got all the attention. Chips on the rim, faded logo on the bottom, but still strong, still reliable. It made noise when you stirred, that rhythmic scrape of metal spoon on glass. She would cradle it under one arm, mixing like she had a whole team of chefs behind her, even though it was just her, a wooden spoon, and you watching from the corner. That bowl saw birthday cakes, meatloaf mixes, pancake batter, and weird gelatin experiments. It was washed 1,000 times, dried with the same old towel, and placed back in the cabinet like a trophy. You never really noticed it until one day it was not there anymore, and that was when it hit you. The bowl was never just a bowl. It was Grandma's way of feeding, nurturing, and giving without words. Every scrape and stir meant you were loved, and every time you see that yellow now, your heart does a little flip. Funny how that works. Handwritten recipe cards in a tin box were the original family cookbook. No app, no Pinterest board, just ink on index cards with smudges of gravy, grease, and love. You knew which ones were Grandma's favorites because they were the most stained, curled at the edges, and had a little star in the corner like a secret signal. Some were written in perfect cursive, others in frantic half-print, like she was writing between chores. The cards were not just recipes. They were instructions for care. Bake until golden, not brown. Use real butter if you can. Add a little more sugar than it says. And tucked into that metal box, they sat in no real order. Alphabetical tabs were just suggestions. You would pull out one for banana bread and find 3 clipped clippings from a newspaper stuffed in with it. Sometimes there were notes on the back. Margaret's favorite, do not skip the cinnamon. Or, John does not like raisins, leave them out. Reading through them felt like hearing her voice, calm and direct, telling you exactly how to make something turn out just right. No big deal, just dinner for the whole family. That little box held generations of memory, written one meal at a time. And when you find one today, the paper might crumble a little in your hands, but the instructions still hold up. They always did. The sewing basket with the tomato pin cushion was like a tiny portal to Grandma's universe. It sat quietly in the corner or beside her favorite chair, always ready, never flashy. The basket itself creaked when you opened it, revealing layers of thread, buttons, needles, tape measures, and old fabric scraps that smelled like cedar and thyme. But the tomato, that bright red stuffed pin cushion with the tiny strawberry attached by a string, that was the crown jewel. It was soft but firm, dotted with pins in neat rows or haphazard clusters depending on the day. Some of those pins had been in there since the Eisenhower administration. You did not touch it unless you were helping. And helping usually meant watching. Grandma would thread a needle in one try, bite the thread to snip it clean, and patch up torn sleeves, loose hems, or busted seams like it was no big thing. It was not just mending, it was preserving. Preserving Sunday dresses, school uniforms, and hand-me-downs that had already gone through 3 cousins. The sewing basket was never empty, never chaotic. It was organized in the way only she understood. Sometimes she let you wind the thread or hand her a button, and in those moments, you felt like you were learning something sacred. That tomato? It was not a toy. It was tradition, and it held more memories than a photo album ever could. Doily-covered side tables were Grandma's idea of making a house feel proper. Every surface had one, under the lamp, beneath the candy dish, even on top of the old radio that only played static. These doilies were delicate spider webs of cotton or thread, handmade or gifted, starched within an inch of their lives and perfectly round. You were not supposed to move them, not even to dust. Which was funny, because they trapped dust like they were built for it. Still, they looked elegant, like lace frozen in time. Grandma did not need expensive things to make her home feel graceful. She had doilies, and those little circles of care turned simple wood tables into family heirlooms. You could lift one corner and see the perfect square of preserved wood underneath, a time capsule of how things once looked, how they were protected. In a world where everyone's redecorating with clean lines and minimalism, Grandma's doilies said the opposite. They said texture matters, sentiment matters. And everything, even the end table, deserves a little dressing up. The Sunbeam electric mixmaster with glass bowls looked like it could launch a spaceship, but all it ever did was make banana bread. Heavy, loud, and slightly intimidating, it sat on the counter like the boss of the kitchen. Grandma trusted it more than any fancy appliance. It had 2 beaters that locked into place with a satisfying click and a dial with numbers that actually meant something. There was no touchscreen, no presets, just Grandma, the bowl, and her instincts. You would hear it rumble to life with a growl that made the whole counter vibrate. And those glass bowls? Thick, clear, nearly indestructible. They clinked when you set them down, held pancake batter like it was sacred, and were never, ever put in the dishwasher. She used it for everything. Meringues, cookies, mashed potatoes, whipped cream, frosting. It could go from slow and gentle to fast and furious with just one flick of the dial. And when it was done, she would scrape every last bit from the bowl with a rubber spatula like it was gold. Watching her use it felt like a magic show, where flour turned into dough and silence turned into smiles. That mixmaster did not just mix. It made moments. It was the heartbeat of birthday prep, holiday meals, and quiet Tuesday nights. Now it sits in thrift shops like a relic, but to us, it will always be the machine that made love edible. Embroidered pillowcases were not for sleeping. Not really. They were for admiring, for smoothing flat with your palm as you made the guest bed, for showing off Grandma's skill with a needle and thread, tiny roses, initials, vines that curled like whispers. They were starched, folded perfectly, and stacked in the linen closet like works of art. You knew which ones were special because she saved them for when company came. And even then, they were only used if you were important enough. The embroidery was more than just decoration. It was intention, time, pride. A dozen tiny stitches just to make one petal. Sometimes she did them by hand. Other times with that old sewing machine that sounded like a train pulling into the station. You could run your fingers along the design and feel the texture, a kind of softness that only comes from care. These were not mass-produced. They were made with evenings and patience, in quiet rooms where the only sound was the creak of a rocking chair. You do not see them much anymore. Pillows today come with zippers and tags and instructions. But these told stories. They said that someone wanted you to sleep well, and somehow you always did. Floral vinyl tablecloths were a permanent fixture on Grandma's kitchen table no matter what season it was. They were wipeable, indestructible, and always had some kind of cheerful print. Big red roses, lemon yellow daisies, or faded pastel patterns that looked like wallpaper from another dimension. You could not stain them. You could not wrinkle them. And every morning, you would hear the soft thwack of a coffee cup setting down, followed by the quiet rustle of plastic against wood. Meals happened here. Spills happened here. Life happened here. These tablecloths were not delicate. They were designed to take a beating and still look good by supper time. If there was a tear or bubble, Grandma would tape it from the underside with the precision of a surgeon. Sometimes there were 2 tablecloths stacked together, one for pretty, one for power. They were easy to clean, smelled faintly like soap, and were always cool to the touch. Even in summer, they had that strange chill to them. The floral print faded over time, but never enough to forget the shape. You could run your hand along the surface and find the memory of every family meal. Macaroni elbows, peach cobbler, that one time someone spilled grape soda and blamed the cat. It all happened here. And the tablecloth, it held it all. The butter dish with the matching glass lid sat right in the center of the table, quiet but essential. It was usually pressed glass or milk glass, and it had one job: keep the butter soft and ready. No foil wrappers, no plastic tubs, just real butter, in a dish that looked like it belonged in a cabinet of curiosities. The lid clinked when you set it down, and the butter underneath was always just soft enough to glide across toast without tearing it. That was the magic. Grandma knew the sweet spot. Not melted, not hard, just right. It was not just about the butter, though. It was about the presentation. Even something simple like toast or biscuits deserved a little bit of elegance. And there was something grounding about seeing it there every day. A small reminder that meals were meant to be enjoyed, not rushed. It sat there at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sometimes empty, sometimes almost overflowing. And when you lifted the lid, there was always that little bit left behind, clinging to the glass like it did not want to leave. Now, butter lives in wrappers, fridges, and squeeze bottles. But back then, it lived in the open, proud, soft, and ready, just like the people who served it. Crocheted tissue box covers were peak grandma energy, equal parts charming and unnecessary. Usually pastel, sometimes striped, always cozy. They turned a plain cardboard tissue box into a decorative centerpiece like it was attending a party. These covers came in all shapes: squares, domes, even little animals. Some had bows, others had frills, and all of them lived in the bathroom, the living room, or Grandma's bedroom, sitting proudly like they were part of the original furniture. You never questioned it. It just was. Reach for a tissue and it felt like reaching through a blanket. Somehow that made it better, more comforting, like even your sniffles deserved a little softness. Grandma made some herself. Others were gifts from friends. It was an unspoken language. Here is a thing you do not really need, but it makes life nicer. That was Grandma in a nutshell. Making ordinary things a little more thoughtful. These covers were washable, repairable, and almost impossible to throw away. Even when they got stretched or faded, she would fold them neatly and tuck them into the linen closet, because maybe someone else would need it. Maybe someone else would feel a little better blowing their nose through a cloud of crocheted kindness. Wooden TV tray tables were not just furniture, they were a lifestyle. They folded out with a creak, stood firm enough to hold a TV dinner, and made you feel like royalty when you got to eat in front of the television. No need for a dining room. Just your chair, your tray, and whatever was on Channel 4 that night. They had wood grain patterns that looked like oak but felt more like plywood, and sometimes had floral decals or brass-colored hinges. Setting them up was a ritual. Grandma would pull one from behind the couch, unfold it with practiced ease, and place a plate on it like it was fine china. Salisbury steak, instant mashed potatoes, a tall glass of milk, and that was dinner. If you were lucky, there was a napkin too. These trays meant relaxation. They meant you can watch your show and still eat warm food. And when dinner was over, the tray would get wiped clean and folded up again, slid back into the rack like a secret tool. They were never flashy, never fancy, but they were reliable, just like Grandma. And sitting with one today, even as an adult, makes you feel taken care of in the simplest way. The greeting card drawer was not organized, labeled, or alphabetized, but it was full of love, anniversary cards, birthday wishes, thank yous, condolences, all stacked together like layers of a family tree. Some were new, some were decades old. You would pull one out and find a note written in perfect cursive, with love, always, or so proud of you. There were cards with glitter, cards that sang, cards that folded out into paper bouquets. They came from friends, neighbors, cousins, grandchildren, and Grandma kept every single one. Why? Because it mattered that someone thought of her, that they picked a card, wrote something by hand, and mailed it. Even if it was just a few words, even if it came late. The drawer smelled like old paper and rose perfume. Some envelopes were still sealed. Others had been opened and taped back together like treasures. You could spend hours going through them, reading pieces of the past and feeling like everyone was still right there in the room with you. The greeting card drawer was not about hoarding. It was about holding on to people, to words, to proof that love was sent and received. And in a world full of quick messages and disappearing texts, that drawer feels more valuable than ever. Wall-mounted spoon collections were like Grandma's travel journal, only shinier. Each tiny spoon hung in a perfect little slot, each one with a name. Yellowstone, Niagara Falls, San Francisco. Places she had been, or maybe places she dreamed of going. Either way, they hung there proudly, rows of silver, brass, and pewter, catching the light in that quiet hallway near the dining room. Some had decorative handles, others had tiny buildings or animals at the top. None of them matched, but together they told a story. You were not supposed to touch them, but you always did. Just to feel the weight. Just to imagine where they came from. It was not about collecting for value. It was about collecting memory. One trip, one spoon, one tiny reminder that life stretched beyond that cozy kitchen. And even if she never left the state, those spoons made it feel like she had seen the world. In a house full of practical things, that little wooden rack of spoons was a spark of wonder, a reminder that Grandma's world was bigger than we thought. Ruffled toilet lid covers were one of those things you never questioned. They were just there. Soft, fuzzy, and pastel-colored like a cupcake topper, they wrapped around the lid with elastic and refused to ever sit quite straight. Sometimes they matched the bath mat. Sometimes they clashed completely. But they always brought a weird sense of coziness to a place that was never supposed to feel cozy. It was the kind of decorating choice that said, even the bathroom deserves some dignity. And Grandma believed that. You would walk in and see the full set, lid cover, tank scarf, even a matching toilet seat cushion. And it would make you smile, even if you did not know why. It was comfort over style. Or maybe it was her style. Either way, it made you feel like everything had its place, even the toilet. And to this day, when you see one of those covers in a thrift store, part of you wonders how something so small could make a room feel so loved. Hummel figurines on the shelf were more than just collectibles. They were little frozen moments of tenderness. Each one had rosy cheeks, soft eyes, and the kind of sweetness that only made sense in Grandma's living room. They stood in neat rows on the hutch or the sideboard, always behind glass, like tiny porcelain citizens keeping quiet watch over the household. A girl with a basket, a boy with a lamb, a pair of friends sharing an umbrella. These were not toys, these were treasures. Sometimes she dusted them gently with a cloth, humming to herself like she was tending to old friends. You were not allowed to touch, but you stared, and they stared back. Their faces never changed, but somehow they always looked familiar. Maybe because they reminded you of a gentler world, or maybe just because they had always been there. Hummels were not flashy. They were soft, nostalgic, and quiet, just like the stories Grandma told while sitting nearby. Glass grape clusters for decoration were the most confusing thing in the room, and yet somehow also the most beautiful. Heavy orbs of colored glass strung together with wire and arranged in a shallow bowl or draped across the mantelpiece. Were they fruit? Were they paperweights? No one knew. But they glowed. Light passed through them like stained glass windows, turning the afternoon sun into a quiet rainbow. Purple, green, amber. Colors that did not match anything else in the room, but still looked right at home. Grandma never explained them. She just said, "They are pretty, aren't they?" And they were. You wanted to pick them up, feel their weight, roll them in your hand, but you did not, because they were Grandma's. And she had placed them just so. The grapes never served a purpose, but they did not need one. They were a reminder that beauty, even in a bowl of glass fruit, could make a room feel complete. The butter churn lamp was maybe the most Grandma object in existence. A wooden butter churn, the kind used 100 years ago, hollowed out, wired up, and topped with a lampshade. It made no sense, and yet it was perfect. It sat beside her favorite chair, glowing softly in the evening while she read or crocheted or dozed with the television humming low. The lamp did not match anything, but it belonged. It had presence. A quiet pride in being old and repurposed, just like so many things in her house. You never asked where it came from. It had just always been there. Like her, sturdy, dependable, and full of stories nobody ever told. The butter churn lamp was not just a light source. It was a symbol of how Grandma could take something outdated and turn it into something useful, something warm, something that lit the whole room in a way no new lamp ever could. The chamber stove did something no modern appliance dares attempt. It kept cooking after you turned it off. That was not a gimmick. That was engineering genius wrapped in cast iron and chrome. Born in the early 20th century, the chamber stove became a quiet sensation in post-war homes for one incredible reason. It cooked with the gas turned off. Thanks to thick insulation and a sealed oven chamber, you could roast an entire chicken, switch off the flame halfway, and let retained heat do the rest. It was efficient, elegant, and oddly futuristic. And while it lacked a touchscreen or a clock, it came with something more valuable: trust. People swore by it. Some still do. The stove's signature thermowell let you slow-cook soups and stews deep inside a lidded metal pit while you handled the rest of your day. The burners had griddles built right in, and the oven door sealed tighter than a vault. It made people feel clever, like they were cooking smarter, not harder. But in the rush for newer, faster, shinier appliances, the chambers was quietly pushed aside. Too heavy, too bulky, too slow. Or so we thought. Why did we stop believing that doing more with less was the smartest design of all? Popcorn ceilings were everywhere, and you did not think twice about them until one started flaking into your cereal. Created as an easy solution for soundproofing and hiding imperfections, These textured ceilings were sprayed on like cheap whipped cream, giving homes a bumpy, cratered look that no one questioned until they started falling apart. Vacuuming the ceiling became an actual task in some households, and painting over them was a test of endurance and futility. But the real danger was deeper than dust. Many popcorn ceilings contained asbestos, a now banned toxic material that can cause serious health issues. Once people found out, the ceiling went from being just ugly to outright terrifying. Suddenly, every flake falling from above felt like a silent threat you could not ignore. That meant removing them was not just inconvenient, it was dangerous and expensive. Families who had lived under them for years were suddenly advised to bring in professionals just to make their homes safe again. Something meant to be invisible became the most threatening part of the room. And the disasters did not stop there. Just take a look under your feet. Before open concept became the norm, the kitchen pass-through window was the perfect compromise. It was a small rectangular opening in the wall, usually with a sliding panel or shutters, that connected the kitchen to the dining room. You could serve dishes straight through, peek out to check on guests, or whisper a message without leaving your post at the stove. It was functional and a little bit fun, like a drive-through for your own home. Kids loved it because it felt like a secret door. Adults loved it because it saved steps. These pass-throughs became iconic in mid-century ranch homes and suburban houses. But as walls came down and kitchens turned into wide-open living spaces, the humble pass-through lost its purpose. Some were plastered over during remodels. Others became awkward holes in drywall with no clear use. But once, they made kitchens feel like command centers, like you could be in two rooms at once. What did we gain when we knocked down those walls? And what subtle joys did we lose? Behind the smooth cabinet doors of many mid-century kitchens hid a surprising tool, a pull-out dish drainer that lived inside the wall. After washing dishes, you would slide out the rack, load it up, and let everything drip dry behind closed doors. It kept counters clear, made the kitchen look tidy, and gave a sense of order that matched the rest of the house. Some even had small trays underneath to catch the water. It was not about hiding the mess, it was about making space feel peaceful. When plastic racks and countertop drainers became standard, these hidden drying systems quietly disappeared. New kitchens no longer had room for them, and they were hard to clean and prone to mold. But there was something thoughtful about them, something neat, something kind of charming. Now, we just pile dishes in the sink or leave them out for hours. The idea of drying dishes out of sight feels like something from a different era, one where appearances mattered, but so did small comforts. What else have we stopped tucking away for the sake of convenience? Sunken bathtubs were supposed to be the crown jewel of a modern bathroom, sleek, seamless, sophisticated. The lowered tub, flush with the floor, created a luxurious, spa-like illusion. But in reality, they were a daily hazard, especially for children, seniors, or anyone trying to step out with wet feet. You had to crouch down awkwardly just to get in, then hoist yourself back out like climbing out of a trench. Slips were common. Cleaning them was worse, with mildew hiding in all the nooks around the base and edge. Some were surrounded by carpet, of all things, which soaked up water and turned into mold magnets. What was meant to feel like a high-end resort experience ended up as one of the most regrettable design choices in bathroom history. Even worse, the layout often forced the rest of the bathroom to feel cramped, sacrificing function for flair. These tubs were quickly replaced in the 80s and 90s by shower tub combos or freestanding options that were safer, cleaner, and far more practical. But stepping out of a sunken tub often meant stepping into another aesthetic misstep, one that tried to look timeless but crumbled under the weight of its own imitation. The butter mold was once a quiet symbol of pride that lived in farmhouse kitchens and rural homes across the country. Before butter came in sticks wrapped in wax paper and stacked in supermarket coolers, it was made by hand, from cream churned for what felt like hours. But churning was only half the ritual. The real finish came when that butter, thick, golden, and soft, was pressed into a hand-carved wooden mold. These molds came in all shapes and designs: roses, wheat stalks, stars, initials. Some were simple, some were intricate. but all of them said the same thing. This was made with care. They were not just decorative, they were a mark of identity. In local markets and community fairs, families were recognized by their unique butter stamps. It was not branding, it was heritage, a kind of craftsmanship that was passed down like a recipe. Butter molds were rinsed, dried, and stored in the coolest cupboard. They were cleaned with a toothbrush, handled like treasure. Today, you will find them dusty on antique shelves, mistaken for cookie presses or quaint kitchen decor. But they were never just for show. They were the final touch to a process that took time, patience, and love. When did we stop honoring the beauty in what we used to make by hand? Tucked quietly beneath the sink, the under-sink water heater was one of those features you never thought about, until it saved you 5 minutes in the morning. These little tanks provided instant hot water to just one faucet. Perfect for hand washing, quick dishes, or shaving if your sink doubled as a grooming station. Unlike the giant water heater in the basement, this one was small, efficient, and practically invisible. In homes where the main water heater was far away, these under-sink units made life easier. No waiting for hot water to snake through the pipes. But over time, centralized systems improved. Builders started planning homes with better plumbing routes. Energy efficiency standards changed, and these tiny tanks were declared unnecessary. Today, most have been removed or sit unplugged, collecting dust in old houses. But their legacy lives on in those first few seconds of hot water we all take for granted. Once, someone thought of that. Once, someone made it easier. When did we stop building for the little moments? There was a time when people smoked everywhere, in the car, at the dinner table, even in the bathroom. That is why so many mid-century homes had small ceramic ashtrays built right into the bathroom wall, usually next to the toilet or above the sink. They matched the tile, often set in pastel pink, mint, or baby blue, and they were not there by accident. The bathroom was one of the last quiet places in the house, and for many adults, it was a place to take a moment and take a puff. These ashtrays were permanent, glazed into the wall, designed to last. But as the health risks of smoking became impossible to ignore, these features quickly became awkward reminders of another time. People stopped using them. Some covered them with art. Others chipped them out entirely. Renovations wiped them away, but they left behind a story. A time when cigarettes were so common, even the bathroom made room for them. If you find one still in place today, it often draws a double take. Not because it is shocking, but because it is so easy to forget how normal it once was. The ashtray says nothing, but it remembers everything. Warming drawers used to be the quiet hero of the kitchen, especially when dinner was not ready all at once. Tucked just below the oven, this thin, shallow drawer kept plates warm so that food would not go cold before it reached the table. You would set it to low, slide in your dishes, and when the roast came out, everything was ready to serve piping hot. This feature was a nod to formality. Meals meant something, and every detail mattered. Back then, no one wanted to pile roast beef onto a cold plate. But as life sped up and microwaves took over, warming drawers started disappearing. They took up space. They were easy to forget about. And soon, they felt like a relic of a more elegant time. Builders stopped including them in standard models, and even higher-end kitchens started to phase them out. Now, if you see one, it is usually mistaken for a storage drawer. But once, it meant warmth, literally and figuratively. It meant taking care, not just serving food. When did we stop setting the table like it was worth it? Pull-down desks were supposed to be a dream come true for small homes. They looked clean, folded flush against the wall, and promised a pop-out workspace anytime you needed one. But once you actually started using them, the problems appeared fast. Hinges creaked, the desktop wobbled, and if you tried to put any real weight on it, like a typewriter or even a stack of books, it sagged. The latch mechanisms often wore out, making them hard to open or harder to keep shut. Some desks never sat flat, making writing or typing feel like working on a tilted tray. Others developed permanent lean from years of being overloaded with just a little more than they could handle. Most were too small to be useful, barely big enough for a notebook and a lamp, and if you ever forgot to fold it back up, it became a shin-height tripping hazard. Over time, people stopped using them altogether. Some turned into junk mail stations, others got blocked by furniture and forgotten. The dream of functional minimalism collapsed under the weight of poor craftsmanship. But at least a bad desk could be avoided. The next trend was something you literally had to sleep on, even when it stopped working. The O'Keefe and Merritt Aristocrat range was not just a stove, it was a throne. Towering over every other appliance in the room, this 734-pound marvel was the ultimate status symbol in post-war kitchens. It did not whisper innovation, it shouted it. With twin ovens, broilers, warming drawers, and a built-in timer clock, it looked like something from a science fiction movie, only real. Housewives of the 1940s and 1950s dreamed of owning one. Advertisements called it the Cadillac of kitchen ranges, and they were not exaggerating. You could roast a turkey, bake a pie, broil steaks, and warm dinner rolls at the same time. It was massive, yes, but that size came with function. Wide enamel cooktops offered space for every pot and pan. The dials were thick, confident, and satisfying to turn. It felt like driving a classic car, slow, powerful, and designed to last forever. But time moves fast. Kitchens shrank. Stainless steel arrived. And the Aristocrat, once a dream, became too heavy, too large, too old-fashioned. Most were discarded during remodels, sold for scrap or left in garages like relics from a forgotten empire. But ask anyone who grew up with one, and they will tell you that stove made cooking feel like a ceremony. When did we decide that smaller meant better? Pea gravel patios looked charming in home improvement magazines, rustic, effortless, a little slice of the French countryside dropped into a suburban backyard. But once they were installed, the reality quickly set in. These patios were nothing more than a layer of loose, sharp-edged stones that never stayed in place. Chairs sank into them, tables wobbled, and walking barefoot was out of the question unless you had calluses like leather. Every breeze sent pebbles scattering into the grass, and lawnmowers did not take kindly to rogue gravel. Kids hated playing on it, pets tracked it indoors, and any kind of sweeping or raking turned into a full-blown yard battle. Even worse, the so-called drainage benefits rarely worked out, leaving the area soggy in winter and scorched in summer. Within a year, most patios looked patchy and uneven, like a poorly maintained construction site rather than a space for relaxation. Homeowners tried tamping the gravel down, adding edging, even gluing it in place, but nothing made it better. It was a great idea in theory, undone by the simplest problem: gravel rolls and people fall. Still, even inside the house, that same mix of fashion and frustration kept showing up, especially in the form of a curtain that was not quite a wall and not quite anything useful at all. Imagine opening your cabinet to plan dinner and seeing a chalkboard right on the inside of the door. Some even had pull-down recipe scrolls made of parchment or linen, mounted like an old-fashioned map. You could write a grocery list, the day's menu, or a reminder that your mother-in-law was coming over. These weren't just novelty features. They were part of how a kitchen thought out loud. In a time before smartphones or sticky notes, these were the planners, the notepads, the command centers of the kitchen. And they told a story. In chalk dust and grease smudges, you could see a family's week unfold. Sometimes the writing faded, but the memory of it never did. It was handwriting that knew your routines better than you did. Eventually, they faded out. Whiteboards came in, then apps, then voice memos. Cupboards no longer had messages waiting. Now, kitchens are silent and glossy, all smooth wood and cold steel. No one scribbles meatloaf tonight inside a drawer anymore. The charm is gone, and so is the handwriting. But in old kitchens, those chalk smears still whisper what once was. When did we stop writing things down where it mattered most? Imagine soaking in the tub after a long day, only to hear your mother's voice echo through the wall. Dinner's ready. In mid-century homes, this was not a dream, it was reality. Bathroom intercoms were part of built-in home systems that connected every room with wired communication. You could buzz the kitchen from the basement, call the front door from the master bedroom, and yes, even talk from the bathroom. It felt futuristic, like living inside a spaceship, but the novelty wore off. The sound quality was rough, privacy was gone, and nothing killed a relaxing bath faster than your dad asking where the remote was, through a speaker. By the 1980s, intercom systems were seen as clunky and outdated. They stopped working, they were never repaired, and eventually, they were just decorative panels collecting dust. Some people pulled them out entirely. Others left them in the wall like little relics of forgotten innovation. Today, they sit frozen, buttons unpressed, speakers silent. They are a reminder that once, even the bathroom was part of the conversation, whether you wanted it to be or not. Sunburst clocks, brass peacocks, oversized metal sculptures of sailing ships. If it glittered and could be nailed to drywall, it was probably up there. Wall decor in the 1970s took the loudest ideas from mid-century modern and cranked them past 10. The sunburst clock especially became the crown jewel of every living room, often mounted above a fireplace or a sagging plaid couch. It was supposed to say, "Sophisticated modern family," but what it actually said was, "Time stopped in 1973." These pieces aged fast. Dust built up in the corners. The faux gold finishes dulled. And eventually, people began to question why a clock needed 20 sharp metal rays stabbing out into their personal space. Like so many things from the 70s, it was a style built on boldness. And boldness is a hard thing to live with, especially when it came in shades of burnt orange and baby poop brown. The bread box was once as essential to the kitchen as the sink or the stove. A humble wooden or metal container, usually perched at the back of the counter, it kept loaves fresh in the days before plastic bags and preservatives took over. Its job was simple: slow down staleness and keep out pests. But its presence meant more than that. It meant you baked or bought bread regularly, that someone in the house cared about toast, sandwiches, or buttered slices to go with stew. Opening the lid released the faintest scent of yeast and crust. For kids, it was the treasure chest of after-school snacks. For adults, it was a silent reminder that home meant warmth. The sound of the lid closing, soft, final, was part of the rhythm of daily life. Bread boxes came in colors to match tiled kitchens and formica counters. They had floral decals, chrome handles, and rounded corners that looked almost cheerful. Over time, though, as preservatives lengthened shelf lives and bread became an afterthought, the box disappeared. Modern kitchens left no room for something so quaint. But in losing it, we lost a ritual. A quiet pause in the day. When did bread stop deserving a place of its own? The step-down bathtub was supposed to bring spa-level relaxation into your home. Instead, it brought stubbed toes, twisted ankles, and more than a few emergency room visits. These sunken tubs looked sleek in design magazines, especially when surrounded by lush ferns and candlelight. But reality hit hard the moment you tried to use one. They were awkward to get into, nearly impossible to clean, and posed a serious risk to anyone with limited mobility. The edge was invisible to the untrained eye, so guests would stumble, kids would fall in, and elderly family members avoided them altogether. On top of that, the plumbing was often complicated. The water lines were hard to access, and the moisture around the recessed area led to mold problems. For a feature that took up so much space, the step-down tub delivered very little comfort in return. And unlike a regular tub, you could not just swap it out. It was built into the foundation. Expensive to install, expensive to remove, and all too easy to regret. But even if you managed to climb out in one piece, your next problem was likely waiting for you in the kitchen. Screwed directly into the wall, these heavy-duty wall-mounted can openers were as stubborn as they were convenient. Usually found right next to the stove or sink, they were the type of kitchen gadget you used without thinking, until you bumped your head into one or sliced your finger trying to clean it. You locked in the can, turned the large handle, and heard that satisfying scrape as the lid peeled away. And it never moved. That was the point. It was always there, ready to go. Back then, cans did not have pop tops, and handheld openers were prone to rust or breaking. So this chunky mechanical beast became part of the kitchen wall like a light switch. It made even the smallest task feel intentional, like you were part of a well-oiled machine. And it never broke because it was made to be used, not replaced. Some people even bragged about how fast they could open a can of tomato soup. But as kitchens modernized and designers chose clean lines over utility, wall-mounted can openers became kitchen fossils. They were ripped out and tossed away, their holes patched up and painted over. Now, most folks do not even recognize them. But if you ever find one, run your hand along the gear teeth. It might just stir something in you. Why did we stop building things to stay put? Before everything went digital, your bathroom scale looked like a piece of furniture. Heavy frosted glass, thick chrome framing, a sharp square shape with a dial that ticked with every movement. These glass cube scales were the height of sophistication in the 1950s and 1960s. People did not hide them in closets. They displayed them proudly, like a modern sculpture with a practical purpose. The mechanical dial was mesmerizing. Watching the needle settle felt like opening a safe. But they were not exactly easy to live with. They slid across tile, they cracked, and once digital scales arrived, their bulky, high-maintenance cousins quickly fell out of favor. People swapped them for cheaper, lighter, more precise alternatives, and the cube disappeared. But there was something charming about a bathroom scale that felt solid, serious, like it had authority. You stepped on it with the same respect you gave a bank teller or a high school principal. Today, these old scales are collector's items. Some people keep them as decor. Others try to get them working again, just to relive the satisfying click of a well-built machine. They may not sync to your phone, but they never needed to. They already had weight. The cookie press was a piece of holiday magic that turned dough into art with nothing but a squeeze. With its interchangeable metal discs and ratchet-style handle, it could create dozens of perfect cookies in seconds, each one shaped like a flower, star, or tree. It was especially popular during the holiday season, when kitchens smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, and the radio played old Christmas tunes. The press made baking feel like a celebration. Kids would fight over who got to press the dough, and every batch felt like a tiny miracle. No rolling pin, no cookie cutter. Just one graceful push, and a perfect cookie appeared. The dough was usually soft and buttery, flavored with almond or lemon, and finished with a dusting of sugar or colored sprinkles. The cookie press was about more than efficiency. It was about beauty. It said your cookies could be delicious and delightful, but as store-bought cookies became more common, and as baking turned into a rare weekend chore instead of a family tradition, the press went quiet. It sits in the backs of drawers now, its discs scattered and forgotten. But for those who remember, it was a joy machine. When did we stop making food that felt like play? Chain-link curtains swept into homes with all the glitz of a disco ball. Made of dangling metal loops, they sparkled, shimmered, and promised a modern, open-concept elegance that felt straight off the pages of a designer catalog. They were hung as room dividers, doorway accents, or even statement walls. The problem was, they never quite worked as advertised. The links tangled constantly. They snagged on sweaters, jewelry, and even hair. Pets would get stuck in them. Toddlers could pull them down. And for something that looked so sleek in showrooms, they sounded awful. Every movement produced a rattling metallic hiss, like someone jangling keys for attention. Cleaning was next to impossible. Dust clung to the chains like it had paid rent, and good luck wiping down hundreds of tiny metal rings. Over time, the shine wore off, the links dulled, and the novelty wore thin. What had once been stylish soon felt like living inside a giant wind chime. But just as these decorative dividers were quietly being retired, another trend had already taken root in suburban basements, one that involved steam, sweat, and a surprisingly low return on investment. There was something oddly comforting about opening a little metal door built right into the bathroom wall and seeing 10 or 12 pristine white rolls lined up in perfect rows. It felt organized, even luxurious, like the room was always ready for a guest. These cabinets were common in mid-century bathrooms, usually hidden behind a chrome-framed flap or sometimes a flush ceramic tile cover that matched the walls. The idea was to keep the bathroom tidy and always stocked. No frantic calls for a new roll mid-situation. It was a time when even small design choices felt thoughtful. These little wall cabinets whispered, "We plan ahead here." Some even had sliding glass doors lined with scalloped trim or pastel accents, but as rolls got bigger and styles leaned toward sleek and open shelving, these relics of the past quietly disappeared. Builders stopped adding them. Homeowners covered them up. They became too much of a hassle to install, too snug for modern toilet paper, and too outdated to match today's tastes. And yet, every now and then, someone finds one hidden behind a renovation. Slightly rusted, forgotten, but still perfectly functional. For a moment, it is like opening a time capsule, one that once promised preparedness, privacy, and the quiet dignity of never running out. If one of these sparked a memory, share it in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more moments you forgot you grew up with.